Hi, I'm Miss Tyler, and welcome to Context for Kids, Week 10, Torah portion, Mikketz, meaning at the end. What? I'm covered with what? Let me get cleaned up, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, that's much better. I was down in the basement working on the Context for Kids studio that we're building, and so I was covered. I've been taping and texturing, and I've been sanding, and I was covered with dust. So that's coming hopefully in a couple of months. It's been a challenge. Anyway, so here we are in week 10, Torah portion, Mikketz, and that's Genesis chapter 41 verse 1 through chapter 44 verse 17. And this is the chapter where we see Joseph's rise to fame. But before we get to that, I wanted to remind you about the drawing that I'm holding. Taking entries all month, and the winner will be chosen in the first week of January. Be chosen at random because you guys have been doing such beautiful artwork. There's just no way to choose, and so I'm going to have to draw from a hat. Otherwise, it's just too much for me. Anyway, so I'm accepting coloring pages, and I'm accepting if you want to do a little report on something you've learned, and the winner will get to choose their choice between my book, King, Kingdom, Citizen. This one's really good for teenagers and grown-ups. And this one is good for the whole family, Context for Kids, Honor and Shame in the Bible. And the winner will get to choose whichever one they want. So, I'm going to put it down. All right, I'm going to show you two that came in this morning. These ones are really gorgeous. One's by Joshua, and the other is by Natalie. Aren't they beautiful? Keep them coming. My wall is hopefully going to fill up quickly. Anyway, so here we go. Torah portion, Mikketz. And I love the word Mikketz. Why do I love the word Mikketz? Because it's a lot easier to say than Vayishlav. And I just wasn't raised speaking Hebrew. That's the honest truth. Doesn't come naturally to me. By the way, I'm so excited. Almost time. All right, so in chapter 41, we see some really, really cool stuff with Joseph, and we see the first mention of two important Egyptian concepts, magicians and priests. And in ancient Egypt, which if anyone knows me knows this is one of my favorite areas to study, because Egypt, for all intents and purposes, is where the children of Israel came from. They lived there. They ended up living there for hundreds of years. So a lot of stuff that we see all throughout the scripture has to do with Egypt, and learning about Egypt helps me understand different things that are written, and it's just very interesting. So I like to study Egypt, and I got myself a new book, and I've been learning about Egyptian magicians / priests. Now, their magicians were not what we would think of when we think about going off to a magician show, where somebody's doing tricks and pulling rabbits out of a hat, or maybe hiding a lady in a cabinet, and that she, walks out the back because they got a trapdoor. Should I have not mentioned that? Oops. Now they'll have to kill me. All right. So, it's not the kind of magicians that we think about. These were professionals, and they were very highly respected. They really were the 1%. Very few people in ancient Egypt could read and write, and so these guys were the keepers of these secrets, of the books of spells, incantations. They would if you wanted your neighbor cursed, they would curse them with a curser. If you were really in love with the guy down the street, and you would have them do a love spell, and supposedly, according to one of these love spells that I read this morning, be following after you like an ox longing for grass. I thought that was really funny. Or they'd be, doing spells so that, the agricultural produce would be great that year. So those were the magicians. They were professionals, and they only worked about 20% of the year, at their respective temples. And so the rest of the year they could be in private practice, in their community. They were like, a lot of them were like doctors, and they had medical knowledge. So there's a lot of overlap with professions where we would have doctors and magicians and priests separate. They had priests who were magicians and doctors. So, the ancient world, they just thought differently about the things. Oftentimes they thought differently about the things that we would call science than we do. And some of the things that we would call science, they would call magic, because what's science to a person who doesn't understand it? It's magic. Right. If somebody from ancient Egypt saw a car going by, they'd go, wow, magic. That's awesome. So keep that in mind. Now, let's talk about Joseph. Joseph is in jail, and Pharaoh has a dream, and we were talking about dreams last week. And so Pharaoh has this really disturbing double dream, and he asks all his magicians, all his wise men, what's going on? Now the wise men, the priest, one of the classifications of priest was the chief of secrets. And so when a pharaoh would have a dream they didn't understand, they would go to the people who had the secret knowledge, the magicians, the priests. But Pharaoh had a problem because none of the chief priests or magicians, they couldn't understand what on earth Pharaoh's dream was about. And so, Pharaoh's very deeply disturbed, and the cupbearer recognizes that he has blown it 2 years ago. In prison, Joseph properly interpreted his and the baker's dream, and of course it didn't go well for the baker. And it really did go well for the cupbearer, and he's cupbearer again. And so he tells Pharaoh about this Hebrew kid in the jail. Of course, he's not a kid anymore. He's a grown man. And he's 30 at this point. As a matter of fact, he has been a slave or a prisoner for 13 years. All, getting close on to half his life. And he says, well, I remember that when you were angry. He probably didn't like reminding Pharaoh that he'd ever been angry. Wanted him to forget it. Let sleeping dogs lie there. So he says, when you were angry at me and you put me and the baker in the prison, in the guard's house, and we had a dream, and this guy, he interpreted them, and he interpreted them correctly. So, there you go. There's a guy who can interpret your dreams. So Pharaoh has Joseph brought up from the jail and has him dressed in linen and shaves his head. Not personally. No. So what's the big deal about linen? What's the big deal about shaved heads? Well, it's very possible in Pharaoh's mind that he was coming face to face with a priest. Priests had shaved heads. Priests dressed in fine linen. And actually, when we look farther on in the Torah portions, we're going to see that the priests did wear linens. Now, Hebrew priests do not shave their heads at all. That was, no. That was an Egyptian thing. And so, he's right, he shaves his head, and he comes before Pharaoh, and Pharaoh tells him everything, and Joseph reveals the nature of Pharaoh's dream and tells Pharaoh what to do. Now, the wise men and sages in ancient Egypt were the people who could see the future. And the priests were the ones who had secret knowledge. So not only did Joseph give this secret knowledge to Pharaoh that no one else in his kingdom had, but he also told him the future and what to do about it. And so Pharaoh's sitting on his throne, and he says, this guy's a priest. He has to be a priest. This is what priests do. Now, how do I know that Pharaoh believed Joseph was a priest? Well, biggest thing is, he gave him the daughter of a priest to marry. That wasn't something that was lightly done. Priests all throughout the ancient Near East and Africa stay within priestly families. We see it in Israel. Priests marry from priestly families. It keeps the genetic line priestly, for lack of a better term. When you are looking at, wanting to keep a certain genetic line that has priestly knowledge, you keep it within the family. That was all over the world. Of course, God did it for an entirely other reason, and God's reason was the covenant that he had with Aaron, Moses' brother, and then specifically through Aaron's son Phineas, and later on through Phineas' great-great-great-great-grandson Zadok. That their line specifically would be the priests, and the high priests would come from them. So when God did it, God was honoring a covenant, a grant covenant that he had made with Aaron and his family. But in the other nations, they believed that certain people were genetically superior to others. I mean, it's why pharaohs give birth to pharaohs and kings give birth. Oh, I don't think there's. Well, there was a female pharaoh who could have given, birth to a pharaoh. But the other pharaohs, no, they weren't given birth to nobody. Biology lesson here. Kings don't give birth to princes. I don't think it's ever happened. All right, we're just going to forget that happened. Do-over. All right, so like I said, Joseph was given the daughter of a priest in marriage. That made Joseph right there a member of the priestly class. But it also made Pharaoh also made Joseph a member of the ruling class because he put his own signet ring on Joseph's finger. Now, I don't usually teach spiritual application, but I'm going to make a really big exception here because this is really cool. I don't know if you've ever heard about Messiah ben Joseph, but the ancient Jewish sages spoke of the Messiah to come. But there was a problem. See, the scriptures clearly pointed to a Messiah ben Joseph, someone who was going to be like Joseph, who would suffer and be disgraced and then save the people like we're going to see Joseph does next week. They also saw Messiah ben David, the conquering king, and they didn't know, is this going to be the same guy? Is it going to be a guy who suffers and then comes back and is the king? Or is it going to be two different people entirely? And they didn't know, of course. We do know it's going to be the same one. And he came as the suffering servant last time, and he's coming back as Messiah ben David, the conquering king. But the whole messianic picture, well, not the whole thing, but the big messianic pictures start with Joseph. And Joseph, as you'll see, is associated not only with rulership and authority, directly under Pharaoh who was supposed to be a god on earth, all right? Second in command. But he's also associated with priesthood, and we know that right now, Messiah is in the heavenly temple serving as our eternal high priest. So, big doings in the life of Joseph, and Joseph teaches us an awful lot about the roles of Messiah, priest, and king. So, that is pretty much it for this week. It's really an exciting Torah portion, and I love Egypt, which is one of the reasons why, from now on through Exodus, it's really fun for me. I love sharing this stuff with you guys. It's my fun stuff. It's my hobby that I study between studying covenants and first century context and all the other stuff. It's just really interesting. It pops up in the Bible all through the Psalms and in really surprising places. So that's it for this week. Next week, we're going to find out what happens with Joseph's brothers. Things are going to get really crazy. But that's for next week. Anyway, so like I always say, if this is your first time through and you've never done it before and you have little ones and you want to make it fun, check out my dear friend Sarah Hawk Valente's Lessons in Yeshua's Torah. It goes through all 52 Torah portions for the year. And even if you're starting right now, 10 weeks in, you're only 20%, you just start and you do it. Okay? Or you can start from the beginning, catch my videos from the beginning. And if you've got kids who like things really zany, check out Stan Randall's TorahPuppets.com, and he has a YouTube channel, and I will try and put that up. Remember to enter the drawing. I'm really enjoying getting and hearing from you guys. It's a lot of fun. So we will see you next week. And remember, I love you, and I'm praying for you. And I'm so proud of you guys when you try so hard to learn. It's a lot of fun for me. So take care.